Let's see. We're going to continue now with Ismael Llorens, and he's going to speak about the perspectives, the user's perspectives of the personal assistant. Ismael is a member of precisely of the Federation of Independent Living, and also for our forum, and he works hard here in the Valencian community. In 2012, he was a co-founder of FEVI, the Spanish Federation of Independent Living, the FEVI we call it, and he has appeared in the Congress of Deputies April 2013, and in 2018 in the Commission for precisely for people with functional diversity. He gives lectures all around Spain, and he is a committed activist for rights for people with a functional diversity, and surely his lecture will be most interesting for all of us. And so, Ismael, you have a half an hour. But as we're friends, I'm going to say that maybe you could speak less than 30 minutes. Good afternoon. We're going to be quick so we can recuperate some of our lost time, because we have to leave at 7 o'clock on the dot, and we have a great deal of content to see this afternoon. Now, in the dictionary of the Royal Academy of the Spanish language, we see that the word liberty has many definitions, and I'm going to speak about four. One says that liberty is a state or condition of someone who is not a slave. Liberty, it's the state of someone who is not a prisoner. The third states that democratic systems, the right to a superior value which assures the free determination of people. And lastly, we have freedom of circulation. It's the right of people to freely choose their place of residence and to move about in a given territory. So, with regards to all this, we see that persons with functional diversity and who require support for their daily lives, and if we do not have a personal assistant, we suffer all of these things. In other words, we're our slaves for our family, and our families are our slaves. Usually mothers and sisters, and on many occasions we are prisoners in our own homes due to accessibility, or because we cannot go out because we depend on the availability of family, relatives, friends, and the like. Neither do we have, is it easy for us to become independent from our families? Because what can I tell you about that? And then do not have the possibility to exercise self-determination because we do not control most of the aspects that affect our daily lives. And so therefore, neither are we free, neither do we enjoy self-determination. So even though my functional diversity is a physical one, and this is what I mostly understand about, because we understand about ourselves more than other things, well then I need a personal assistant, and this is applicable to any type of diversity, physical diversity, intellectual diversity, sensorial or mental diversity as well. I forgot to put my slide up here. Here we see if, we're slaves, we're prisoners, we do not have self-determination, and we cannot move about freely. So we can't choose where and with whom we wish to live, and so we cannot exercise this freedom. So we have two concepts. Firstly, independent living, and a personal assistant. Independent living leads to self-management and all those aspects of lives that we, and in our lives that we can do ourselves. And then a personal assistant helps with our personal autonomy, etc. And a personal assistant has the peculiarity that that person does what he or she has to do in that person's home here. And this is what I can say about the personal assistant. So in Spain, with a personal assistant, and when this service is rendered, it's Law 39/2006. This is a law which it's the rendering. This amount of money is not enough because it covers about 4 or 5 hours per day, and the rest of the day, what do we have to do? It's a law that leads to more independence than autonomy. And besides, it's a law, and the jurisdiction has been transferred to the autonomous communities, and each autonomous community manage this differently. Then this is a law showing that we're not all the same under the law. And sometimes it depends on which autonomous community you live in. And then after 12 years, so this is not our law. It's not the one that's going to help us with our situations. Let us review the data, the official data that come from the dependents, and 1,200, only 600, 500, 0.54% would correspond to personal assistance. However, if of those 6,000 and some, we take away 5,600, which would correspond exclusively to the Basque Country, and we remove 700 and some from Castilla-La Mancha, data which presumably have been fattened, then we see that we only have about 174 recognized provisions for personal assistance, 0.02%. More data there. We have these autonomous communities: Aragon, Balearic Islands, Canary Islands, Cantabria, Extremadura, Murcia, and La Rioja, plus the cities of Ceuta and Melilla, which have not recognized any provision for a personal assistant. Zero, in other words. And then what is striking also, that would be that in Andalusia, there are 9 provisions for personal assistance of more than 259,000. And of those 9, I'd say that most come from our colleagues who are part of the pilot project for independent living, which is being carried out in Andalusia. In Asturias, there's only 1 person out of 28,000, and in the Valencian region, 5 out of more than 72,000. So therefore, the user of a personal assistant with this law has very sad perspective, bleak perspective, because it's not the type of personal assistant that we want and who will give us dignity and the freedom that we need. And what happens with this bleak panorama? Well, here we have our traditional movement of associations, these people there, and this just removes the prestige from our movement, and because they think that independent living might substitute the way they live, and they speak about independent living, but they still manage these residents, which goes completely against what we are for. So it's, in other words, in the morning they're thieves, or in the morning that's like a jail, and they take care of thieves, but in the afternoon they go out and rob banks. So the curious coincidence is that at midday, there was a conference in Seville which is coinciding with this one, and I suppose it's just a coincidence. I don't want to really think bad about them, think badly about them, but I think that these activities generate danger, and that they might become unnecessary intermediaries between the administrations which grant these provisions and the intermediary who doesn't want to renounce to that direct management by managing that personal assistant, except that it be done voluntarily. And here we need something more. We need something which will give us a different perspective, which will lighten our path. We need a change, because we need to have a personal assistant through direct payment, because this is the personal assistance that each person needs, one's own personal assistant. And some need a different type of assistant. And we think that empowerment should be given thought. We need support products, electric chairs, adapted telephones, and also all of this will help our personal assistant do everything well. We need universal accessibility, and we know that in our country, since December the 4th of last year, excuse me, it's a joke, but you know that it's not the case. It should be, but I think there is a new moratorium. They say, oh, more years are going to go by, blah, so forth. So here we know that there are offices of independent living. They're managed by people who use a personal assistant. So a very important section is this, that support amongst PARs. And as I was saying before, an important aim or objective is to promote deinstitutionalization of those people who live in residences against their will. And so the key should always be the freedom of choice, and to live one way or another, but never in a forced manner. Another important aspect which we're going to have to fight for from now on is the training of our personal assistants. People want to impose different degrees, things that are being ruled out, but in the end I think that training should be overlooked by us, and I think that's the right to a personal assistant is a right, and no one knows oneself better than oneself. So we should not give up what we're going to do with our personal assistant, how, where, when, and the like. I also want to underscore something else, and all these things here with independent living, and this is a very old document that goes back to 2008, which is still in force. It was prepared by our colleagues Javier Romagnac, Antonio Centeno, and Manolo Bato, and we miss him very much. Now the document is entitled Indicators for Independent Living, and this is an analysis about the indicators that should be complied with these projects which look into independent living, so that this can be done correctly. We see many approaches from the traditional system for these types of associations, but people want to be modern, and so I have to say that we need to have 3 changes. We have a participation of a community life to avoid and to compensate the deficits of the citizens, and above all, we need to focus on the person to comply with our first objective, that is to say, participation in community living, and the projects for independent living must be destined to the realization of all types of activities, not only basic activities. This is a trap, really. And so we have basic laws and those that aren't. And the hours here should be enough, so enough that the person needs and open to any person with functional diversity. And then we'll need to promote this, and we have the promotion of living and housing, and where we have to speak about the payments here. And the second aim to compensate these deficits here of the citizens is that this should be open to the participation of all people with functional diversity, and also with regards to the person's age. We need to offer training in the philosophy of diversity with independent living. People with functional diversity, we feel that society looks at us through other eyes. We're going to have to train ourselves and amongst our own selves to be empowered to be able to decide, make our own decisions, and to be able to decide correctly. The freedom that we would get from this personal assistance, something we dream about, should not be something that we would have to pay for, because most people collect their salaries at the end of the month, and then they buy clothes, food, and some people save, some spend it in leisure activities, and we almost always are obliged to spend that money with a personal assistant. And so we cannot decide how we're going to spend our money. It's as if we were punished. And the projects in the third area is we have to focus on the person always. And by focusing on the person, we see that we have the direct payment should be considered a right instead of an economic negotiation. Direct payment paid for by the authorities, and periodically we need to justify this. And then another important issue is the decision-making. The user and the administration, by always listening to the user, one needs to see what the user says about the most suitable type of service. And no professional should make our decision for us. So this is a summary of this document, which is very interesting, and you've seen it in the pen. You can find the document, and there's also a chart in order to look at the different projects, and it has parameters for independent living. And there was an interview a few days ago of a professor of political philosophy from Valencia University. Her name is Adela Cortina. And what she said was that the developments with women is changed Spanish society a great deal in the 21st century. And then this should help with the developments with other movements. Some have been marginalized, and someone who has been marginalized, women, for example, understand this and can lead developments and help other people who have been marginalized. And wasn't referring to us exclusively, but she was referring to all groups. And it's curious because, historically speaking, the feminist movement, it's not a criticism in the least. This is just a statement. But the feminist movement and women with functional diversity and people with functional diversity who are women, and they were invisible. They were never even taken on board. But now there are movements, and the colleague that spoke about this. And at this moment, I'm remembering a colleague and friend, I'd like to, Marita Iglesias, and without any doubt whatsoever, she was the greatest expert that we had in our independent living movement, nationally as well as internationally, and with violence, gender violence, and functional diversity. And from here, I would like to send her my regards, my recognition, and my admiration for her courageousness. And the panorama reflected shows that for us, we see perspectives that are certainly not very cheerful: economic crisis and all of these things. But then with meeting with politicians, often we've met with politicians, and the result is somewhat well, they say they understand us, they listen to us, they smile, and when the meeting is over, we leave, and then the next day, everything still continues just the same. The people continue with that policy about us, without us. And so they don't really listen to our grievances. And I think we're going to have to look for formulae. And this morning we heard about coalitions, different supranational coalitions to try to be stronger. However, I think that this will not be resolved until we become a problem for the government. And so, because people need to, 10 years ago there was a parade to make our group be more visible, and they didn't want us to be a problem, so maybe someday we'll achieve what we want specifically by taking the street over with our parade. And I have to give an example and keep to my time limit, so here I conclude, and thank you very much.